Alright, we've just undergone a little fiasco regarding advertisements and the use of 4G data, which you don't need to know about. It was quite the debacle. Anyway, we're now going to be reading Environmental Choices by Gausset 2016. I don't really know how you pronounce that, but anyway, it's by Quentin Gausset, Jens Hoff, Christian Elling Schiel, and Emil Nørgaard, which I've probably pronounced wrong. Anyway, so we will begin with the introduction, which Siri has already read very adeptly, but unfortunately not on camera or microphone or whatever. Yeah, there's no camera. So we're going to read it again. Introduction. There is a broad consensus today around the threat posed by global warming and the need to address the problem. A large percentage of carbon dioxide, which is CO2, emissions come from consumption patterns found at the household or individual level. In 2011, transport accounted for 33% of the total CO2 emissions in Denmark, of which more than two-thirds come from private transport. And household energy consumption, mainly for heating houses, accounted for 22% of total emissions. Although Denmark's energy strategy to make the country independent from fossil fuel by 2050 focuses on systemic and infrastructure changes, it also relies on reducing citizens' energy consumption by 6% by 2020, as compared to 2006. In the long-term perspective, this percentage probably needs to increase in order to reach a carbon-free society by 2050. Such goals cannot be reached without citizens changing their environmental behavior substantially. For this reason, this chapter looks at the factors that motivate people to reduce their CO2 footprint in various areas of consumption, and the barriers that stand in the way of such reductions. We analyze these questions theoretically as well as empirically, using pooled survey data from 2005 respondents in 3 Danish municipalities. Theories on environmental behavior change. There are a variety of primarily economic and socio-psychological theories and models that identify the factors that determine environmental behavior. Many of these theories take rational choice theory as their point of departure. This theory, a central tenet of economic theory, assumes that individuals, when faced with the choice between two options, will choose the one that maximizes their private benefits and minimizes their costs. The expectancy value model builds on this idea, stating that behavior depends on how individuals believe they can gain the benefit that they seek, and on how they evaluate, positively or negatively, the outcome of the behavior. The theory of reasoned action elaborates on the expectancy value model by adding norms to beliefs and attitudes, and by introducing intentions as an intermediary factor between these beliefs and attitudes and behavior. Thus, according to the theory of reasoned action, an individual's behavior depends on his or her intentions, which depend, in turn, on attitudes and beliefs towards the outcome of that behavior, as in the expectancy value model, and on the subjective norms and normative beliefs, i.e. on their belief regarding how people will judge their behavior. Over time, a third factor was introduced into the mix that focuses on whether individuals perceive that they can control behavior, and this new model is called the theory of planned behavior. Emotions have also been identified as an important aspect of attitudes and beliefs, e.g. people might strongly react to fear. Even though emotions might not appear to be rational, this theoretical approach shares with other approaches, including the rational choice theory, the idea that behavior choices are determined by the individual's own values and/or knowledge. Although the theories of reasoned actions and planned behavior accept that the norms and the social influence of others have a place in the discussion, they still focus very much on individuals and private benefits. Other scholars have attempted to shift the focus towards collective altruism and ethics, or towards social pressure as determinants for behavior. For example, the model of the new environmental paradigm holds that people do not behave selfishly just to maximize benefits or to avoid social disapproval. They also behave for social and altruistic reasons according to what they believe is ultimately ethical and moral. The norm activation theory argues that two critical aspects determining altruistic behavior are whether people are aware of the consequences that their actions have on others, and whether they accept the responsibility for these consequences. Stern attempted to merge the theories of the new environmental paradigm and norm activation into a new value belief norm model. He argues that people who hold biospheric and altruistic values are the most aware of the consequence of their actions, take responsibility for them, change their personal norms, and adopt environmentally friendly behavior, whilst people holding egoistic values prefer to ignore the consequences of their actions and or deny any responsibility, like people who come from business schools or work on Wall Street. The focus on collective norms has been further refined by studies arguing that behavior might depend less on private benefit or on the desire to do good and behave well than on social compliance and the desire to behave as others do, regardless of the material benefit for oneself or for others, and regardless of ethical considerations. Using social networks can therefore be a crucial approach to anchoring identity and behavior. This approach links to political theories that study not just compliance to social norms, but also compliance to rules and regulations prescribing and proscribing certain behaviors. What is proscribing? Let's look that up real quick. Oh, okay. It's the opposite of prescribing, essentially. It's forbidding, particularly by law. Okay, the more you know. Back to the text. Such as prescribing and proscribing certain behaviors, and to the study of the importance of citizen participation in decision-making. As we can see, there are two broad clusters of theories on environmental behavior. On the one hand, theories developed around the rational choice theory focused on individuals who are presumed to behave in order to maximize their own benefit and welfare. On the other hand, theories focusing on social responsibility, social norms, or social pressure focus on groups than individual behavior. The first cluster of theories locates behavior change within individual choices, while the second locates it within social relations. Although they differ in focus, these different models overlap and combine a limited number of recurrent factors. Therefore, in our survey, we selected the following 7 factors that we think are the most influential in determining environmental behavior. Number 1, economic considerations. People adapt their behavior and consumption patterns to the means they have at their disposal. They then try to minimize expenses and costs and maximize benefits. Following this approach, environmental behavior can be prompted by subsidizing sound behavior and taxing unsound behavior. Number 2, values. People behave according to a certain morals and ethics. They work to create a better world for their children and refrain from behaving in ways that harm others. But ecological or biospheric values can contradict each other and can compete with other sets of values, such as private and or collective welfare. Environmental policy must therefore promote ecological values over others. Number 3, norms. People adapt their behavior to societal expectations, i.e. to what they believe people expect from them. They conform to norms, behave like others, or avoid behaving in ways that are considered to be antisocial, which would risk the disapproval of others. Large-scale behavior change can be triggered when a certain critical mass of people, preferably role models, change their behavior, pulling a larger part of the population along with them. In these cases, environmental policy can rely more heavily on role models and promote collective environmental action or collective green identities. Number 4, legislation. People adapt their behavior according to legislation, both out of a social and moral drive to avoid social judgment and ostracism. See point 2, but also to avoid the sanctions and penalties that might derive contravening laws and regulations. Number 5, responsibility and empowerment. People might be willing to change their environmental behavior if it proves detrimental to their neighbors or to future generations. But they will only do so if they are aware of the consequences of their actions and if they are convinced that changing their behavior will have a direct and immediate impact on the well-being of others. Number 6, knowledge. People's behavior depends on the knowledge they have of different costs and benefits of their behavior and consumption patterns, what is socially expected from them, legislation, and the consequences that their behavior can have on themselves and on others. Providing information to the public can therefore be an important tool for triggering environmental behavior change. And finally, number 7, social categories. Gender, age, income, and political orientation can correlate with different needs or interests, types or level of knowledge, sets of values, and sense of responsibility or powerlessness, and can also be the factors that determine behavior. Data and method. The results reported in this chapter are based on a survey of 2,500 years old from Danish municipalities of Kolding, Køge, and Herning Commune. Siri's giggling about my horrific pronunciation, and is now going to correct me.
Kolding, Køge og Herning.
Kolding, Køge, og Herning communes. The survey was conducted by computer-assisted telephone interviews in April 2012, so 5 years ago now. The respondents, while I wasn't even doing my bachelor's yet, holy fuck, I'm old, or young, whichever, I don't know what I was trying to say there. The respondents were selected on the basis of an extract from the Central Persons Register, the CPR, which I'm still waiting for, the Danish government register of all citizens, containing approximately 10,500 people, which sets the response rate of this survey at 19%. However, even though the survey's response rate was modest, the data are considered representative of the population in Denmark with respect to age and gender. Because the data were deemed representative, the dataset was not weighed. Although there are 2,005 respondents in the dataset, N values from 1,323 to 1,371 in the logistic Although there are 2,005 respondents in the dataset, N ranges from 1,323 to 1,371 in the logistic regression analyses. Okay. Cases with missing values in any variable used in the analysis have been dropped, so list-wise deletion. The survey contains information on environmental behavior, environmental attitudes, knowledge, motivation to take action on climate, and socio-demographic questions. Dependent variables. We used 4 parameters that track specific choices made by survey respondents. We asked if they look for eco-labels when shopping, wash clothes at the lowest possible temperature, own a car, and travel by plane for leisure and family visits, non-business flights, in the past year. These factors cover different aspects of environmental behavior relating to consumption and transport, and also cover both daily choices and choices that are made less frequently, such as plane travel. These choices have different impacts on carbon emissions. However, even choices that do not have a strong and direct implication with regard to carbon emissions, such as look for eco-labels when shopping, are relevant. This is because the behavior is easy to adopt and denotes a certain awareness of and responsibility for environmental problems. The survey contained more parameters, including the annual amount of electricity consumed, annual expenditures associated with domestic heating, the annual distance driven in private cars, and a set of 12 self-reported questions concerning environmental habits. The questions, which called for a specific numerical answer, resulted in a high amount of don't know answers, blanks, and inconsistencies. We chose to leave them out of the analysis. The 12 self-reported questions regarding environmental behavior addressed whether respondents take action to protect the environment, such as buying seasonal fruits and vegetables produced locally, eating less meat, and recycling. Responses included I do it as much as I can, I am considering doing it more, and I don't do it, and I am not considering doing it. What a progressive nation! Items were recoded in such a way that the answers doing it and considering doing it more scored with the value of 1, and the answer not doing it or not considering doing it scored 0. Why would you not consider doing something? Ever, no matter what it is. Sheesh. Experimentation with index construction of behavior through a factor analysis resulted in unsatisfactory Cronbach's alpha values. I mean, if you know what that is, please tell me, because I have no goddamn clue, nor inclination to look it up. Which is bad and a habit I should change. Let's look it up. I mean, honestly, actually, let's not. It's clearly some regression thing that I won't understand, but please do explain. Indicating that there is a lack of covariation between the variables. This demonstrated that the respondents do not behave in the same way across different climate-changing actions. Instead of using indices, we selected only 2 specific variables, washing clothes at the lowest temperature and looking for eco-labels when shopping, as indicators of climate-friendly behavior. These items were selected because they turned out to be the most representative for shopping and for energy-saving actions in the home. Independent variables. The 7 factors hypothesized to determine environmental behavior were operationalized in our questionnaire as follows. 1 and 2. Economic considerations and values, egoism and altruism. In our questionnaire, we asked informants what motivates them the most when adopting an environmentally friendly behavior. A. Economic benefit. B. Improving the health of the family. C. Protecting threatened species. D. Reducing climate change. Or E. Improving the resource base of future generations. Or F. Having a good conscience. The first answer was coded as an egoistic dummy variable, 0 or 1, and was taken as an indicator of economic considerations. In our analysis, this was equated to an indicator of egoistic values. Answers C, D, and E were merged and coded as one altruistic dummy variable and were interpreted as an indicator of altruistic values. 3. Norms. To uncover normative behavior in our survey, we asked whether respondents could be motivated to adopt more environmentally friendly behavior if they A. were part of a group sharing the same environmental goals, or B. if they were encouraged to do so by friends, family members, or colleagues. Responses were the degree of motivation coded into a dummy of 1, i.e. it motivates me greatly and it motivates me to some extent, and 0 if it motivated them poorly. 4. Personal responsibility. The issue of awareness and empowerment is covered by a series of questions asking respondents whether it is worth changing behavior in Denmark if A. the bigger nations do not move in the same direction, B. whether it is worth changing behavior if others do not do the same, and C. whether the effects of climate change are too far in the future to worry about today, and D. whether the threats of global warming are exaggerated. I mean, I'm obviously not going to stop and comment on the last two, because we as educated individuals studying global development know how ludicrous they are. These are 4 continuous variables with scores ranging from 1 to 5, with 5 being strongly agreeing and 1 being I'm an idiot. 5. Legislation. We asked respondents to what extent they agreed with the idea that the government should increase taxes so that people would pay the full environmental cost of travelling by plane or driving cars, and whether there should be more regulations to force people to adopt more environmentally friendly behaviour. These variables also have scores ranging from 1 to 5, with 5 being strongly agreeing and 1 being strongly disagreeing, and are coded in the same way as the variables above. Number 6. Knowledge. We did not try to measure respondents' environmental knowledge. Instead, we asked them to judge their own levels of knowledge of climate change in particular. The answers were recoded into a dummy variable with a lot and some coded as 1 and a little and nothing coded as 0. Number 7. Social categories. 6 demographic variables were included to control for potential confounding, i.e. gender, age, education, household income, political orientation, and a dummy variable for having children under 18 years of age in the household. Method. We examined which factors influence environmental behavior by analyzing the data from the questionnaire. We addressed the magnitude of the relationship between different sets of variables using Pearson correlations. We explain the differences in environmental behavior through the 4 dependent variables covering different aspects of environmental behavior. For these dichotomous variables, we employed a binary logistic regression procedure that uses maximum likelihood estimation to estimate the probability of pro-environmental behavior. To facilitate the interpretation, the odds ratio and standard errors are also presented as marginal effects. Although not presented, a test of collinearity between the independent variables was conducted by examining the VIF, tolerance, and eigenvalues. No significant collinearity was indicated. All of our analyses were run in Starter SE 12.0. There's then a big table called Table 5.2, which has a bunch of values for things like, everything they've described. Egoism, altruism, being leftist, Denmark is too small to make a difference, this, that, and the other, as well as things like age, gender, and so forth. Have a read of it yourself if you are interested and or are paying attention in the course, which is indicative that I've just skipped it. Anyway, results. Generally speaking, all of the 7 factors explained above do influence environmental behavior. However, they do so in different and sometimes subtle ways. Number 1, informants who declare that saving money is their primary motivation to change their environmental behavior tend to exhibit less environmentally friendly behavior than informants whose motivation to change environmental behavior is not primarily economic. Who would have thought? A total of 53% of those primarily motivated by money look for eco-labels, and 83% wash clothes at the lowest possible temperature, compared with 71% and 89% respectively for those who aren't obsessed with cash. When controlling for other variables, respondents primarily motivated by economic savings are less likely to look for eco-labels when shopping than those having another primary motivation, with the odds being 0.68, according to Table 5.2, while the correlation with washing clothes in lower temperatures disappears. These results may seem puzzling since environmentally friendly behavior, food items with low energy eco-labels, washing clothes at lower temperatures, or using public transport instead of private cars, often allows people to save money. The paradox is that people who declare to be primarily motivated by saving money tend in fact to save less money, or in any case not more, than those who do not have economic factors as their primary motivation. If we interpret the motivation to save money as an egoistic and individualistic value, as opposed to an altruistic value, we might conclude that the behavior of people holding egoistic values is less environmentally friendly than the behavior of the people holding altruistic values, and also that their behavior is self-contradictory. This will be verified when discussing the next point. It's followed by Table 5.3, then it continues. Number 2, altruistic values, so declaring that caring for others, caring for nature, or caring for future generations is the primary driver of one's environmental behavior, correlates positively with greener behavior. A total of 73% of respondents holding altruistic values look for eco-labels when shopping, and 90% wash clothes at the lowest temperature, compared to 57% and 84% respectively for those who do not have altruistic values as their primary motivation. When controlling for other variables, people holding altruistic values are more likely to look for eco-labels, a result that is not statistically significant, however, and also more likely to wash clothes at the lowest temperature than respondents whose primary motivation is not altruistic, odd ratios being 1.27 and 1.67 respectively. People who define themselves as leftists also tend to exhibit greener behavior than others, and do so in a proportion comparable to people holding altruistic values. Just says see Table 5.3, and you can note the high odd ratios there of 1.41 and 1.67 in Table 5.2. In Denmark, when it comes to taxation and socioeconomic policies, left-wing voters tend to give more support to state interventionism, the welfare state, and community solidarity, whilst right-wing voters tend to support free market solutions and policies rewarding individuals for their personal achievements. Schematically, one could say that left-wing voters hold more altruistic values while right-wing voters hold more egoistic values. Thus, political values can be a good indicator of egoistic/altruistic values, and therefore environmentally related values. There is a strong correlation between the two factors, see Table 5.6 below. People who generally put collective interest before individual interests are more willing to sacrifice some of their private benefit for the collective environmental benefit, while those who hold egoistic values might not be ready to sacrifice their comfort or welfare for the environment. This is especially true when it is difficult to establish a clear link between individual local behavior and its global and future negative consequences. Number 3. Following social norms, behaving like others or in a way that is approved of by others, can be an important motivation to adopt a more environmentally friendly behavior. When considering whether to adopt a greener behavior, some informants are highly influenced by what others think or do. Our results show that 71% of people who said they are influenced by their community look for eco-labels when shopping, and 91% wash at the lowest possible temperature, compared with 58% and 82% respectively for those who declare they are immune to the influence of others. In our regression analysis, people who declare they are influenced by the community are more likely to look for eco-labels and more likely to wash clothes at the lowest possible temperature than other respondents, odds being 1.37 and 1.45 according to Table 5.2. because few people want to be perceived as environmental pigs, norms can be effective in inducing a behavior change. Number 4. Legislation is an important tool for encouraging environmentally friendly behavior. Legislators have the power to distribute economic rewards and to levy taxes on behavior or consumption that is detrimental to the environment. A total of 45% of our respondents support more environmental regulation and 41% support more environmental taxation, compared with 37% and 39% respectively who oppose such policies. The rest were undecided. However, there are disparities among the different categories of informants. As Table 5.5 indicates, there are more supporters of an increase in environmental regulation and taxation among those who look for eco-labels when shopping and wash at the lowest possible temperature than among others. Table 5.5 also shows that plane travelers tend to oppose paying the full environmental cost of plane travel. Wow. But surprisingly, they also tend to support a more global approach to increase environmental regulations. This is confirmed in our regression analysis, odds equals 0.72 and 1.20 respectively. Owning a car does not seem to make a big difference in terms of attitudes towards environmental taxation and regulations, but when controlling for other variables, car owners tend to oppose an increase in environmental taxes. This paints a mixed picture of attitudes towards more environmental regulations and taxation. On the one hand, people whose daily behavior is environmentally friendly tend to support increasing environmental regulation, and also tend to support, or at least they do not oppose, increasing environmental taxation. Car owners and plane travelers, on the other hand, tend to oppose increasing taxation, but also tend to support, or at least do not oppose, increasing environmental regulation. Number 5. Some people are skeptical regarding the difference they can make as individuals. For example, 29% of our respondents agree that it is useless for them to change behavior if others do not follow suit, compared to 61% who disagree and 10% who are undecided. Likewise, 23% of our respondents agree that it is useless to take action in Denmark unless the bigger countries, such as China and the United States, also take action, compared to 64% who disagree and 13% who are undecided. Logically, the skeptics are also significantly less willing to adopt a greener behavior, look at eco-labels, wash clothes at lower temperature and refrain from flying or owning a car. That those who believe that individual and national action does not make a difference, even if others do not follow suit. In Table 5.6, for example, only 55 to 58% of those who think that Denmark is too small to make a difference, that it is not worth changing behavior if others don't do the same, and that the effects of climate change are too far in the future to be worried about looking for eco-labels when shopping, compared to 70 to 72% who think the opposite. These results are partially confirmed in our regression analysis, at least for climate change in the future, and for the idea that it is not worth changing behavior if others do not follow. Surprisingly, people who fly non-work related flights tend to be less skeptical. 43% of those who think Denmark is too small to make a difference, or that the effects of climate change are too far in the future, flew such flights in the past year, compared to 50% of those who did not fly. However, when controlling for other variables, these correlations disappear. One finds instead a correlation between car owners and the perception that Denmark is too small to make a difference. All this confirms the general picture that people who adopt environmentally friendly behavior, in both home and transport habits, tend to think globally and act locally, such as they are more convinced than others that their own individual behavior can or does make a difference on a larger scale. Number 6. Knowledge plays an important role in several theoretical models, whether it is knowledge to maximize benefit, to understand the consequences of one's action, knowledge about legislation and social norms/expectations, or actual knowledge about climate change issues. A total of 65% of the respondents believe that they possess a good knowledge of environmental issues. These informants do indeed exhibit a greener behavior than those who think that they have only a little knowledge. For example, 70% of those who think that they have a lot of knowledge look for eco-labels and 90% wash clothes at a lower temperature, compared to 50% and 83% respectively for those who say they do not have much knowledge. People who say they have adequate knowledge seem to fly more than others, 52% compared to 42%, although this correlation disappears when controlling for other parameters in a regression analysis. What are these other parameters? I mean, I'm going to assume it's income or education or something like that, but still, probably should tell us, right? Let's scroll to table 5.2 and see if they actually tell us and I'm just chatting shit, or if they don't. I can't really see it unless they're controlling it with income, but I mean, I can't compare these numbers, like, off the top of my head. Anyway. Well, I wonder how they're controlling it, but anyway, let's leave that alone for now. When it comes to owning a car, however, a regression analysis demonstrates that people who say they have adequate environmental knowledge are less likely to own a car than others. Odds are 0.68. This leads us to conclude that knowledge is one of the most important factors in determining environmental behavior. The level of education does not have significant effect on either look for eco-labels or wash clothes at lowest possible temperature in the logistic regression analysis, which begs the question, what the fuck are they teaching them in schools? However, education does correlate strongly with knowledge, and just as knowledge does, it correlates negatively with owning a car and positively with flying. This indicates that the level of education does indeed have an effect, even though it sometimes affects behavior through specific knowledge of climate change issues, and as illustrated in a path analysis, figure 5.1. Social or demographic categories correlate with environmental behavior in different ways. First, women perform more positively than men on all indicators of environmental behavior, but especially when it comes to looking at eco-labels, buying local and seasonal fruits, or owning a car. Women are also more likely than men to be leftist and to hold altruistic values. Second, the environmental behavior of elderly people is significantly greener than the behavior of younger people. Wow, didn't expect that one actually. But older people also tend to think that climate change is too far in the future to concern them. Yeah, because they're gonna be dead! And to oppose more environmental regulations. Their relatively sound environmental behavior seems therefore to be more motivated by habits than by ideological reasons or a stronger environmental consciousness. However, they are less likely to declare that money is their primary motivation to adopt more environmentally friendly behavior. So, older people are actually acting in a way that's better for the environment, but they don't care about their children. That's hilarious. Third, wealthier people are more likely to have a car and to make holiday-related trips by plane than poorer people. Interestingly, income does not correlate with declaring that saving money is the primary motivation for changing behavior. In other words, the desire to save money is not a characteristic specific to poorer respondents. It is a concern that cuts across all categories of income. Moreover, income does not correlate with a call for more just legislation and eco-taxes, which means that poorer people are as likely to support eco-taxes as wealthier people. Another finding that has relevance for the issue of environmental justice is that poorer respondents tend to support the idea that travelers should pay the full environmental cost of plane travel, while wealthier people tend to oppose it, even though an increase in eco-taxes would probably strike poorer people harder. Fourth, like knowledge, the impact of education is somewhat ambivalent. Although people who have higher levels of education are more likely to own a car or fly, when controlling for other factors such as income or having children, higher education correlates negatively with owning a car, odds equals 0.9, but still correlates positively with flying odds equals 1.11. Fifth, almost all families with children at home own a car, but when controlling for other factors, they also tend to fly less than families without children at home. This might be because it is cheaper and often more convenient for families with children to go on holiday by car rather than by plane. People with children also tend to be more altruistic, to disagree with the idea that the effects of climate change are too far in the future to be concerned, and to support eco-taxes and more environmental legislation. This may indicate that parents are concerned about the consequences of global warming on their children and not just on themselves. I should fucking hope so, otherwise that's just downright bad parenting. Discussion. Our survey clearly shows that environmental behavior is multifaceted and that behaviors relating to daily consumption i.e. looking for eco-labels or washing clothes at lower temperatures, differ from choices relating to transport. Daily consumption choices are influenced first of all by altruistic values, norms, feelings of personal responsibility, and knowledge about change, while transport choices are influenced particularly by people's social identity, gender, age, education, income, and family structure, even though knowledge, gender, and age influence both types of behavior. In general, we can say that our respondents are willing to change some of their behavior as a result of increased climate knowledge or social pressure, but that when it comes to transportation, neither of these drivers seem to do the job. Parallel to this divide between daily consumption and transport, one finds a general divide between economic motivation on the one hand and moral or social motivation on the other. If daily consumption behavior can be influenced by the soft power of social pressure and persuasion, it is much more difficult to scroll through these tables, convince people to change their transport choices unless one relies on harder tools such as eco-taxes. But even eco-taxes might be insufficient if people are unwilling to save money because it goes against their comfort, their values, or because the savings realized are marginal with regard to their income. Moreover, there is also a group of people who are skeptics, i.e. those who do not wish to or do not see the point of changing behavior. These people tend to hold egoistic values, refuse taking responsibility for the collective consequence of individual behavior, are more immune to social pressure, and less inclined to believe that they possess the necessary knowledge regarding climate change. So they're ignorant sociopaths, is what that paragraph essentially says. One can read a certain bad faith among environmental skeptics. They claim to be willing to change behavior if it allows them to save money, but they nevertheless do not systemically choose the environmentally friendly options that allow them to save money. So they just hate the environment. They claim that it is useless to change behavior unless everyone else does the same, but they nevertheless are opposed to state intervention that would encourage everybody to change behavior at the same time. They behave as if what mattered most was to be able to continue living as before, which they're not going to be able to do if the planet is underwater, without changing anything in their level of current comfort or habits. When people are unwilling to reflect upon the consequences of their acts, are immune to social pressure, and insensitive to rational calculations, when they should be executed. When the 2/3 of the people declare to have a fair knowledge of environmental problems and are presumably uninterested in learning more, and when behavior is determined in part by social identity rather than by deliberate choices, the best or only option left to trigger behavior change might be new legislation, regardless of how unpopular this might be among skeptics. Well, yeah, you can't allow mad, ignorant people who are determined to live in the past drag down the rest of the population, unfortunately, even if they are like a democratically significant number or proportion. But on the flip side, that's also a dangerous thing to say, because when you start overthrowing democracy, that's when you start having a very dangerous government. So, I mean, either we're underwater or we're not underwater, but you have a fascist state. What a party. What an absolute clusterfuck. Anyway, on the other hand, there is also a core of informants convinced of the urgency of climate problems and the need to change behavior. They tend to hold altruistic values, reflect upon the consequences of their actions, and take responsibility for them. They respond to social pressure and believe that they have the knowledge regarding climate change. This group plays an important role in redefining collective norms, encouraging others to change behavior, and petitioning policymakers to develop new environmental regulations and eco-taxes. They defend altruistic values as well as the personal responsibility of each and every person vis-à-vis the collective consequences of individual behavior. Conclusion. In general, our results give greater support to theories that stress the importance of altruism, social pressure, personal ethics, and knowledge, rather than to theories relying on the maximization of private benefits when it comes to explaining people's climate-relevant behavior. Thus, we found that altruistic values correlated positively with green behavior in a number of areas. The same was the case for the motivation or social pressure brought about by friends, family, colleagues, and/or local community. Knowledge of climate change issues was also found to be an important factor in determining climate change behavior. However, all of these positive drivers of behavior change did not have an impact on people's transportation habits, such as car ownership and holiday-related plane travel. We conclude that the car airline travel category is basically determined by people's social identity, here measured by gender, age, education, income, and family structure, but probably also related to living and work patterns, and therefore is presumably much harder to change than behavior that has to do with shopping routines or energy savings in the home. It is sometimes not so much what people believe about the global or future consequences of local behavior, what people have become, altruist or leftist, or what people wish to do, which is save money, but rather who people are in terms of age, gender, income, and education, at least two of which you can change, which determines how they behave. This is an important point, although it is usually overlooked by the different theories on environmental behavior. The policy implications of our results are that it is unlike soft tools such as information campaigns or community activities will be able to influence transport behavior significantly. In order to do this, harder regulations like taxes or other types of systemic changes such as improvements of public transportation systems, etc., are necessary. And as we can see from our survey, a majority of people support this type of approach.
Wow.
As always, thank you for listening.